Hey everyone, it's Tim from Linessa Farms, specialty in heirloom livestock. Thanks for joining us today. I hope everyone is doing well. Trying to get my camera oriented properly here. Hello, Todd. Nice to see you. So we got various topics to talk about tonight. We've been seeing a lot of hoof rot, which is kind of interesting this time of the year that we're seeing hoof rot. It's really, really dry out there for most of the people, and we're still seeing people getting hoof rot and dryness, which is kind of surprising to some people. I know a lot of people have been told if you keep their hooves dry, they won't ever get hoof rot, and that's not necessarily the case. Um, Sometimes this is just a bacterial infection that settles in the hoof, and there are different things that you can do. Unfortunately, a lot of people neglect to use antibiotics. I think antibiotics, in some cases with hoof rot, are an important factor to consider. So we'll be getting into that in a little bit. We're also going to talk a little bit about copper sulfate usage, if it's dangerous, if it's not, what it can do, what it can't do. I'm going to talk a little bit about tapeworms. Put out a video yesterday talking about tapeworms. I know a lot of people are really, really worried about tapeworms, and you probably shouldn't be, but it's still an issue that you're definitely going to want to um, consider when it comes to your sheep and goats. And we're going to talk a little bit about covering bales. The price of hay is not going down, especially with the price of diesel and the price of seed is up and fertilizer. So when it comes to taking care of your bales, you definitely want to make sure that you're taking care of them appropriately, and that you're doing everything you can to make sure that you're making those bales last as long as possible. We just recently started using a round bale net cover. We are testing it out right now to see how that works. So essentially, it's a portable net that you can put over your round bales, and they can eat through that netting. And we're going to see how it works. Right now, it seems to be working pretty well. We're trying to kind of like figure out the ins and outs of how to use it and how to use it best. And we're going to go from there. But so far, so good. It's definitely slowed down the rate that they're eating, and we definitely have less waste. So we're very excited about that if it continues to work out. Um, Joaquin, nice to see you in Missouri. And Todd is New Hampshire, soon to be Virginia. What are your feelings of clipping hooves to the soft pink area? So, yeah, that's a great question. So, when it comes to trimming the hooves, what you're going to find is all breeds grow hoof different. All breeds grow at different rates. It has a lot to do with nutrition as well. It has a lot to do with the soil. And then there's kind of questions about, well, when I do trim the hooves, do I trim the heels? Do I just trim the toes? What do I do? Please help. And so essentially, if you're not getting down to blood, then you're doing good. We don't want to make them bleed when we trim their hooves, although it is going to happen from time to time. And it is something that you need to be cautious for. But the reality is, you want to trim the hooves and you want to trim the heel as well. So that soft, fleshy part there on the heel area of sheep and goats, you'll want to trim that down too. Don't be too worried about how far down you go. You'll be able to see it as it lightens up and as you start to get close to the, I guess, for all intents and purposes, like the quick. You'll see it, and you should see it before you get down there. So I try to just make the hoof as even as possible. The back hooves are always going to be worse than the front hooves. The front hooves, if they get overgrown, they can kind of chew on them and they rub them and do things with them. But those back hooves are the ones that are going to get bad. And we really want to protect those animals from having those hooves curl over. When the hooves curl over, and many of you have seen this before, when they're curled over, you're going to see um, just debris and rocks and problems and things get stuck in there. And that's what we want to avoid. And of course, you don't want to miss the inside of the hoof either. The inside of the hoof is the most important part. So I'm talking about, when we look at the hoof, you're gonna always, these areas out here on these outside edges are really going to stand out to you. But this inside area right here, it's going to be more closed like this, but you want to make sure that you trim this inside area as well. And again, don't forget the heel part as well. This is where that soft fleshiness is, and you want to trim that down as well. So the whole thing's nice and even. Now, when you look for hoof rot, you want to take those toes and you want to spread them apart, and you want to look right down in here. If you look right down in here, you're going to notice way down in there, that's where it's often overlooked. And that's where you're going to get stinky, pussy, nasty stuff when you get that hoof rot. Um, if you have hoof rot, if it's bad, if your animal is limping, anytime an animal is limping, you want to check it out. If there's one thing, and I kind of wanted to hit on this tonight, so I don't want to get into it too much yet, but when these animals are not acting right, if they're sick, if they're not feeling good, if they're going off a feed, if they're limping, whatever it is that they're doing, you do not have time. And that's a mistake, and we all make it. And I'm sure those of you out there that have been doing this for any amount of time whatsoever, you have been here, you have done this. And so you know how fast these things get out of hand. So if you see a problem, you have to intervene immediately. If you wait, the next day it could be so far gone that you're not going to be able to treat it. So diarrhea, limping, going off a feed, all these things, you have to act immediately. Don't just assume that the animal tripped and hurt their leg or did something like that, or say, well, I just saw them today and they were doing fine, and so surely it's not hoof rot. You need to get in there. You need to open those hooves up as wide as possible and take a look down in there and see what you're dealing with. Now, they can develop hoof rot there. They can also develop hoof rot in the heel, and you can see it in the heel, and you need to trim it down to where you can really see down in there to where this is rotting down into the hoof itself. Generally speaking, hoof rot is going to have a smell that you can notice. It's going to be different. It's going to be kind of funky, and you're going to notice it. So what do we do when we get the hoof rot? Well, when we get hoof rot, what I like to do is I like to use copper sulfate. I made a video on this. If you check out the Linessa Farms video on treating hoof rot, you'll see what I do. I take copper sulfate, I put it in gauze, and I wet it. It is very, very, very important that you wet it. It isn't going to work if you don't wet it. And then I use Coban, that sticky wrap that sticks to itself, and I place the gauze on the hoof, directly on where the hoof rot is, and I wrap it up with the Coban. And what's going to happen with that water in that gauze is it is actually going to that copper is going to start to dissolve, and it's going to kind of make a copper solution that's going to get into and get absorbed into that area where that wound is, and it has a very strong property that will kill bacteria and things like that. So copper works really, really well to kill bacteria. So this is essentially just a topical treatment that is going to be there just for the short term to kill bacteria. Now, we do get questions asked by individuals of, okay, copper sulfate is bad and I don't want my animal eating. And I agree. You don't ever. The only way you ever want to give copper sulfate orally to any of these animals, sheep or goats, is you want to mix it appropriately in water, as we describe how to do in multiple videos. And you want to make sure that you mix it appropriately as directed, and then you can give it as an oral drench. It's a very small amount of copper sulfate to a very large amount of water. You would never, ever want to feed copper sulfate crystals directly to an animal. So the question is, if you apply a copper sulfate dressing to an animal's foot, is it going to contaminate the area where they walk? Is it going to potentially cause any poisoning or anything like that? And that's a great question. And I like that because you're thinking ahead and you're thinking outside of the box. So here's been my experience with copper sulfate dressings. Obviously, we don't want to completely overdo it with copper sulfate dressing. We don't want to pour tons and tons of copper sulfate in there. We want to pour just enough copper sulfate into that dressing so when you get it wet, it dissolves, and that dressing itself basically gets filled up with that copper sulfate solution and gets absorbed into the hoof. And we want to Coban it in place. That Coban is important because it's going to hold it in place for, we would like to say it's going to hold it in place for a day or so. The reality is it's going to depend on your animal and how well of a wrapping job you do. If you put it in place with the copper sulfate bandage, uh, by the time they walk on it, it's going to get muddy. It's going to get nasty. By the time you walk on it, they walk on it, and they finally do lose it. It's it's done. Most of the copper sulfates either completely contaminated with mud and soil, or it's just completely soiled to where I've never personally had an animal eat it. Now, if I do see it laying around, I will pick it up and throw it in the garbage. But I've never, ever, ever come out and saw an animal like chewing on a copper sulfate gauze pad or anything like that. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a non-issue, but you'll definitely want to keep an eye on your animals to make sure and do as good of a job as you can at wrapping that foot with the Coban as well to keep it in place long enough. But essentially, you figure they're going to be walking and stepping all over this thing. It doesn't take it very long for it to get to the point that it's completely wasted, and it's I don't think it's an issue that you're going to have to worry about. And also, those copper sulfate crystals dissolve about as fast as they get hit with water. Um, so Cheryl, you're asking about copper tox. You can use copper tox. If you go and look at the price for a bottle of copper tox after you regain consciousness, if you still decide you want to buy it, you can. I think that the copper sulfate is the way to go. If you don't want to deal with it, if you're like, listen, Tim, I think that's great. And I enjoy your videos, but there's no way I'm going to do copper sulfate dressings and wrap them around my animal's hoof. That's cool. Get yourself some Hoof and Heel, Dr. Naylor's Hoof and Heel, which uses zinc instead of copper, and that's just a liquid that's applied, and you're going to go from there. Here's the deal, though. Here's something that I've been messing around with hoof rot on different farms and helping people out for a number of years now, and I will tell you the best. This is best case scenario. Best case scenario, if I have an animal with hoof rot that I am helping to treat, or if I am treating it myself, what I will do is I will trim the hoof down, not till it's a bloody mess, just down enough that the hoof rot is exposed. I will treat that animal with a copper sulfate dressing, as I showed in the video, which is just a little bit of copper sulfate in the gauze pad. Get it wet so the copper sulfate dissolves, and I Coban it in place. Then I will give the adult animal 3 milliliters injection, intramuscular injection, 3 milliliter intramuscular injection of Nuflor. That is Nuflor. I will type it in right now. Nuflor. This is a medication that you would get from your veterinarian. I would do 3 milliliters intramuscular injection, and then 48 hours later, I give them a 6 milliliter subcutaneous injection, and it is gone. Like 99% of the time, the hoof rot is completely gone. If you don't have Nuflor, you can use LA200. In that case, I would do 2 milliliters, 2 milliliters IM, followed in 48 hours by 5 milliliters subcutaneous. And again, if you don't want to use the copper sulfate dressing with the gauze and the Coban, then just use the Dr. Naylor's Hoof and Heel. If you're going to use the Dr. Naylor's Hoof and Heel, you can pick that up at any major supply store. Tractor Supply carries it, Rural King carries it, everybody carries it. You can get it on Amazon. If you're going to use the Dr. Naylor's, which uses zinc, I would apply it at least once a day, preferably twice a day, for like the first 3 or 4 days, to the area of where the hoof rot is, and still give the injections. The antibiotic makes a huge difference. If you can get your hands on Nuflor, it works the best. I will tell you that Draxxin works really well as well, but Draxxin's like $300 for, last I checked, and somebody will have to quote me on this if they know. If you don't know, you had to look it up. Draxxin, I want to say for a 100 ml bottle, it was something like $300, or maybe that was a 200 ml bottle. It's a lot of money. So what's the deal with Draxxin? Well, the deal with Draxxin is it is a very long acting antibiotic, and people like it because you can give one single shot and then you're done. You just give one shot and you walk away and you're done. as far as I'm concerned, every antibiotic kind of has its drawbacks. New floor burns. The animals tend not to like it. It's really thick. Draxon's super expensive. LA 200, I think, is just it's just overused. I think too many people use antibiotics too often when they don't need to. But hoof rot, I think, is a good reason to use antibiotics. Penicillin isn't going to cut it for you, so don't even waste your time. Nuflor or LA 200. And the trick is the IM injection, which gets it into their system quick, followed up by the subcutaneous injection in 48 hours. And like I said, 90 some percent of the time, it will completely eliminate the hoof rot. But of course, you have to get the hoofs trimmed down, and you have to try to keep the foot dry. You have to you still have to go through all the motions, but I think the missing link that a lot of people miss is the antibiotic. So hopefully that helps you guys out. But the question got brought up earlier today. I was contacted by a viewer, and they said, "Hey, I don't want to mess around with this copper sulfate. I don't want my animals getting exposed to it and eating it." And I think that's a completely fair. Fair observation. And yes, most definitely, you do not want to give copper sulfate crystals directly to your animals. We have had people. You can read horror stories about copper sulfate online. So we teach people the copper sulfate worming method that the universities use, which is you add copper sulfate to water, a very specific amount. You measure it, you stir it, you shake it, you give 100 milliliters oral drench to the adults, 50 ml oral drench to the babies or to the adolescents, I should say. And that's the method that we do it. Without exception, every single time I've spoken to someone on a forum or someone's emailed me or something's gone wrong and I talk to these people about it, they have gone rogue and done things their own way, like so many people love to do. We all know that person, right? You can just close your eyes right now and think of that person that that's like, meh, I'm going to do it my way. And so we've had people out there that we've seen on forums that just fed copper sulfate crystals directly to their animals. We've had other people that said, I don't want to give 100 ml drench. I think that's too much. So I'm just going to make this solution super concentrated. That way I only have to give them 2 mLs. We've had people say, well, if 100 mLs works really good, then 500 mLs would work even better. We've had some people say, I don't really want to measure and go that route. So I'm just going to take a large bag of copper sulfate and dump it into my watering system. You would not believe the things that we have seen. If you do it appropriately, if you follow the directions, it will work and it is extremely safe. If you go off road and decide you want to do things your own way, then you're getting into dangerous territory. And let's be honest, it's that way with anything, right? It's that way with any kind of medication. If you don't use it appropriately, then you're setting yourself up for some problems. So the thing about the copper sulfate, and we made a video that came out yesterday about tapeworms. And the thing to know about the copper sulfate wormer is it just doesn't work for all the other things. It works great for gastrointestinal worms, for roundworms, whipworms, the dreaded barber's pole worm. It works great for all of those. It does not work for lung worms. It does not work for nasal bots. It does not work for liver flukes. It does not work for tapeworms. And so while it is very effective, and most people that are dealing with parasite burdens are going to be dealing with some type of gastrointestinal worm other than a tapeworm, it works fantastic and it does a great job. I still think that it's appropriate to treat your animals, uh, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, depending on where you live, with some other type of wormer that will treat these other things. And that's where I think Valbazin and Dectomax really come in handy. I really, really like Dectomax. I really, really like the fact that it's an effective injectable medication. I love injectable medications. I know that my animal is getting, I know exactly what my animal is getting. I can measure it down to, at least a tenth of a cc if I need to measure it down that far. And I know that they're getting all of it. And I know that it's all getting into their system. So that is the benefit of injections. Now, there are some veterinarians out there recently that have told people that they've said, "Hey, you can use Dectomax as any oral. You can give it orally." And that is true. You can give a lot of injectable medications orally. They don't work nearly as well, and you lose control over it, and you have to use more. The stuff's already expensive, and it's an awesome thing that it is injectable. I wish more medications were injectable. I don't know about you guys. I don't like giving oral drenches. I think it's a pain in the butt. It's an art that you have to get used to. So doing that injection is a blessing, and I think you should take advantage of that. So when you're dealing with liver flukes and nasal bots and all of these other things, especially mange and mites and things like that, Dectomax is your friend. And I think you guys, if you don't have any, you should consider getting some. I'm going to spell that out for you guys here. It's Dectomax. And again, yeah, that's it, and it's designed to be given IM. So every medication has a route of administration that's designed by the manufacturers. And so when we deal with medication administration works. Medication administration works at different speeds. So the fastest we can get a medication into someone or an animal is through intravenous route. An IV route is dangerous because it's there, it's instantaneous. When we give a medication intravenously, it's in the system, and there's no taking it back. And so that has its downfalls. When we give medications intramuscularly, it's a very fast route, and you're limited to the amount that you can give because we don't want to cause pain and discomfort in the muscle. And you have to have a large muscle group usually to put it into, and it's absorbed a little bit faster. Subcutaneous injections, the sub-Q, the under the skin injections, usually into a fat layer or not into a muscle layer. It's just slowing the rate of absorption, is all. So when we look at injections, speed wise, we go IV, IM, intramuscular, and then subcutaneous is the slowest rate of injection. Some medications we don't want to give super fast. We want to give it slow. So in adults, when we have adults that require insulin, we give insulin subcutaneous. It slows the rate of absorption. We do give insulin in certain cases intravenously, but we have to be extremely careful with that. I'm just using insulin as an example. Most antibiotics, historically speaking, with humans, have been given intramuscularly. What the veterinarians have found, and again, I don't dream this stuff up. This isn't this isn't like Tim just decided he was kind of change the way we do things. Veterinarians, a lot of sheep and goat veterinarians switched years ago, decades ago, to giving their antibiotics subcutaneous. They found that it worked better. It slowed and lengthened the rate of administration, of absorption, that is, and they just found that it worked better. So, Dr. Kennedy from Pipestone, one of the best and biggest sheep guys that ever walked the face of God's green earth, he gave almost all of his medications subcutaneous when it came to antibiotics. There's a time and a place for IM drugs. When I talked about giving the antibiotics for hoof rot, that's why the first shot that I said to give was IM, and the second shot that I said to give was sub-Q. I want that first shot to get in quick, and to hit that animal hard and get going, and then the second one not to be as strong. The problem with oral administration of any drugs is we have a bypass effect when the drugs have to go through the system, and a lot of times we lose some of that drug, or that drug can be very hard on things like liver, kidneys. Some drugs just cannot be metabolized appropriately if given orally. They just can't get absorbed. Other ones have special metabolites and certain things on them that need to be broken down by the liver, and it can cause liver toxicity and things like that. So unless you're getting some kind of direction from a veterinarian, you should attempt to give the medication as directed. When in doubt, give the medication as directed. The only reason I switched to giving some of my antibiotics subcutaneously was because I was told to do so under the direction of a veterinarian. So that's my 2 cents on that. Um, so Corid protocol. Let me take a look here at my notes, and I can tell you, while I do memorize a lot of stuff, I don't memorize everything, believe it or not. And that's, I guess, the fun of doing the live stream is is I just can't remember everything. So as far as Corid is concerned, so Corid is an anti-coccidia medication that comes in many different um, many different forms. You can get it in feed pellets, you can get it in liquid. Usually I use it in liquid. So for Corid, if I have individuals that have coccidia, I mix 6 tablespoons of Corid in 16 ounces of water. That's 3 ounces of Corid in 16 ounces of water. So that's my Corid solution. Again, 6 tablespoons of Corid in 16 ounces of water. And I dose that at 30 cc's per 100 pounds of animal. So that'd be 30 cc's per 100 pounds or 15 cc's per 50 pounds. 7.5 for 25 if you want to, do the math. But again, 6 tablespoons of Corid for 16 ounces of water, and I give it at a rate of 30 cc's per 100 pounds. And I treat once a day, every one of them individually for 5 days. I give this as an oral drench. Okay. So I don't just pour this in my drinking water and hope for the best. I give this as an oral drench for individually to each animal that's affected once a day for 5 days. I also always give fortified vitamin B complex a day or two after treatment, because you have to worry about thiamine deficiency with the Corid. That's how Corid works. Corid works by through a thiamine deficiency activation, and that's how it actually kills the coccidia. So it also can cause issues like goat polio and things like that. So you wanna make sure that you keep on top of that. If you're giving Corid, give vitamin B. Corid kills coccidia. If you have coccidia issues, it works really fast. Sometimes it works by the next day. But you still want to, even if they get better, you still want to continue that course of treatment for 5 days. So I will, if you have any questions about that, please let me know, or you can rewatch the video and get it from there. So yeah, so hopefully that answered a couple questions. So hopefully that Dectomax question worked for you. The Dectomax IM is the way to go. The Corid, that's how we give our Corid for our animals with coccidiosis. All right, having a smaller flock, I plan to space out my breeding over 3 to 4 months. If I separate the ewe after delivery for a couple weeks, will she stress too much? Probably. So a lot of these ewes make friends with each other. They run in little packs. You'll notice a lot of times if you have a ewe, if you were to really take the time to sit down and watch, you would notice that your ewes have a buddy. We have our ewes that they always chum up with one other one, and you'll usually find that they rarely travel alone. They usually travel in groups, and they usually have like a friend that they travel with. I think if you run in a small group of ewes, and they're all pregnant together, you can very easily keep them together. So there's a couple of problems that you're going to run into with these darn babies, and it never fails. And this happens with goats and it happens with sheep. And so it's something that I want you to consider. So here's the way that we ideally run ours. We only put our males in with the flock when we're breeding. If we're not breeding, the males aren't in there with them. And I know a lot of you huff and puff about that, and I get it. I do. I understand. But I'm giving you best case scenario, and then you can do what you want with that. So we keep our males in when they're breeding, and then they're out. Then what we do is we have our females that are pregnant and our females that have had babies. Once the females have their babies, they get separated out and they go into their own area with their babies. Um, Once they have the babies, they get separated. So you've got one pen with females with babies and one pen with females that haven't had their babies yet. So why do I do this? Well, the reason that I do this is some of these babies, especially with hair sheep and certain breeds, are extremely aggressive with when it comes to nursing. And you'll see them. You'll see these little rascals. They'll be running around trying to steal milk off of anything that will stand still long enough for them to get milk off of. And so the problem that you run into and that you really have to watch for is that you will have these pregnant ewes or does that have not yet delivered that are getting nursed off of by these little rugrats that are running around trying to steal milk. And if you're not careful, what will happen is they will take every drop of colostrum that mom has, or they'll irritate and sore up her teats to where when her babies are born, she's either not going to have any colostrum or she's not going to want to let them nurse because these little rugrats have ran around and tried to steal milk off of her the whole time. And some of these babies are extremely aggressive to where they do it. And some of you have probably seen this before. So ideally, you try to keep them separated. Now, if you're worried about your ewe, like the first one, generally they tend to fall in line together to where you'll have at least a couple of them that are pregnant at the same time and they go about the same time. Or if you keep them separated by maybe one, like a fence that they can see through or something like that, like a wire mesh fence or something, they do okay for a few days. But separating them out to where they couldn't see any other of their friends, it would probably be detrimental to their mental health. So you can put a wether in there with them. You can put maybe a female in there that's not lactating at all. She has no bag, nothing that you would have to worry about one of the little rugrats trying to nurse off of, or maybe some of your yearling lambs that have not yet. Find a buddy, find someone to put in there on their side with them until some of those other moms catch up. But that's the reason why we separate those moms before birth and after birth, because we have been burned on that before. Probably the worst breed that I've seen this was with our St. Croix. The St. Croix were super duper aggressive. I'm not a fan of them. Um, they're there's they're just they're like attention deficit disorder lambs. It's very interesting. You know, feed conversion ratio is a real thing. If you have not seen feed conversion at work, uh, you will be floored. And some of you I know because I've spoken to some of you privately, and you're like, holy smokes. If you get to where you have different breeds of animals, you will find you'll put out free choice creep, and those lambs or those goat kids will sit there and eat and eat and eat. And you'll see like one breed will just pack on the weight and pull away, and the other one will just eat like a horse and they don't put on any weight at all, or they eat like a horse and they just end up looking like a beach ball. Um, so feed conversion ratio is a real thing, and it can be a real problem depending on the breed that you have and what it is that your goals are. And so that's why we go with a lot of terminal breeds, a lot of meat goats, a lot of meat cross goats, and a lot of terminal wool breeds. That is, they're made to grow. They're made to grow fast. They're made to have good feed conversion ratios, and it goes from there. Some of these breeds, and that was the issue, frankly, that we ran into with the St. Croix. And I'm not poo-pooing the St. Croix. I think the St. Croix is great if it fits your needs appropriately for what your setup is. But in a situation like mine, where I had like blackface cross sheep in with these St. Croix, and they were, sitting at the feed trough together, like it was not even comparable how much of a profound feed conversion rate differentiation was between some of these wool breeds, even the whiteface, compared to the St. Croix. So uh, I don't know how we got there, but we got, sometimes I stop talking. I'm like, I don't even know how I got there, but we got there. So feed conversion ratio. Okay. So sorry I didn't word the question right. I don't have a problem with coccidia. Oh, very good. I don't know when or how often to put cord in their water. No, 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 no. You don't want to do that. Cord's, so I'm just gonna say it. Cord's a nasty drug. Cord is like so many drugs that are out there that we use that are just nasty drugs, and they're not good for the animal, and they have a lengthy withdrawal time, and you just don't want to give them if you don't have to. So Corid is a treatment for coccidia if they have a coccidia infestation and you're having coccidiosis. Other than that, I don't want you using Corid. I don't want to see you using Corid as a preventative measure. I think it's way too much. Um, it's one of those drugs that we use it when we have to, but we'd prefer that you don't, unless you have to. And we have the same things in people medication. We have some nasty drugs. For vasopressors, as an example, for drugs when patients come in when their blood pressure is really low, we have one that comes to mind. It's called Levophed, and Levophed is just a nasty, nasty drug, but it works really well. If you have a patient that has horrible blood pressure and you can't get it up, give them Levophed, and a lot of times it'll work. And I think a Cord is the same thing. It is a nasty drug that we give for animals that have coccidia in that unfortunate situation. It will kill the coccidia, but I would rather see you use some kind of a more gentle preventative medication, in a free choice mineral or in grain. And that would be, that's where you get into drugs like Bovatec or Decox. And those can be found in medicated feeds, and in medicated minerals. Medicated feed is the easiest way to give it, but we have medicated minerals as well. You should be able to find all that at your local store. I know you can find medicated feed for coccidia in the big box stores. I don't know if it's Bovatec or Decox. I want to say it's Decox. And then on Foundation Feed, if you go to Foundation Feed, we have Free Choice Mineral that has coccidiosis, anti-coccidia medication in it, um, in the form of Decox. And we kind of came up with that because we have a lot of people that want to raise their animals on pasture, but they do not want to feed them grain. And so we said, okay, what can we do? And the best answer we came up with is, we can offer you a free choice mineral that has anti-coccidia medication in it. And you can go to Foundation Feed and see that. It is our alpha lamb or our alpha goat kid mix. It's essentially for pregnant females, to give to them, that has the anti-coccidiosis medication in it. So ideally, I would, on my farm, I start preventatively treating my females for coccidia a month and a half to 2 months out from lambing or kidding, and then I treat them and their babies with preventative medication all the way up through weaning, and then the babies continue to get it for about a week or so after weaning, just to get them through that stressful time, and then that's it. Then we're done for a while. And I, knock on wood, I do not have issues with coccidia ever. Um, and I suppose the reason for that is because we keep things as clean as we can. We keep our manure picked up as much as we can, and we treat them with preventative medication. So hopefully that answers your question. When does their milk tend to drop where the lambs can steal colostrum? So that is going to depend on a couple things. So milk dropping is going to be different for every animal. And so a lot of times with the sheep, and the goats, generally when you're getting into the last, and this again is just a generalization, when you're getting into the last 2 to 3 weeks of gestation, and when they're getting ready, to when they're thinking about starting to have those babies, that bag will start to fill out. It doesn't necessarily mean that their milk is in. Their milk is usually not in. But as soon as those little rugrats see that bag, all it takes is for them to be able to see that bag. They associate seeing that with milk, and they will try to nurse off of that female. And so you may have a female that the milk's not in yet, and they're constantly trying to nurse on her. and biting and sucking on her teats, and then they get raw and chapped. And she's just in a mindset of she's going to kick off any animal that tries to get near her, and it's just a disaster. Now, with most of the sheep, you'll see them start to bag out 2 to 3 weeks out. I've seen boar goats. I've had a couple of boar goats before that didn't bag out until the day after they had their babies. They have their babies, and all of a sudden it's like, boop, there's the bag. But generally speaking, you'll start to see it 2 to 3 weeks out, and that's when you got to start watching for them, because as soon as those babies see that bag, they're going to start going after it, and that's a huge problem. So, um, if you guys want to try, I know we talked about free choice mineral for those of you that have not ever tried free choice mineral before. So here's the way that I give my free choice mineral. Everybody does it differently. So if you go to the store and you buy a huge tub of free choice mineral, loose mineral, and loose mineral, I think, is the way to go. The mineral blocks, they tend to chew on them. They want to chew on them, especially the goats, and it's just hell on their teeth. So the free choice mineral, I think, is the way to go for a couple reasons. One, I don't think you get the waste um, with it that you might think that you would get. I think it's more actively used and appropriately used without waste. And two, it's a lot easier on their teeth. So most of the free choice minerals that are out there, they are, um, the animal only really needs 1/2 to 1 ounce per head per day. That's a tiny amount of free choice mineral that those animals actually need per day. And so instead of, what some people will do is they'll make this mistake of where they'll go out there and they'll just dump a 50-pound bag of free choice mineral in a trough or something and just leave it there. Well, no, what you're going to find is going to happen with that is it's going to get rained on, it's going to get stepped on, they're going to poop in it. Like, all these things are going to happen, and a lot of it's going to get wasted. And you don't want to deal with that. So while I do understand that, some people are very hands off and they're like, hey, I'm going to throw my animals out on pasture and I don't even want to see them for, you know, as long as humanly possible. And if that's what you're into, then okay, you can buy an expensive free choice mineral feeder that's got a lid on it and it turns with the wind and everything else. And it's a couple $100, and you can do that. Or you can simply just get yourself a pan, a nice rubber pan, something that they can't flip over, and just go out there and give them about as much mineral as they clean up in a day, and just test it. If you've got 30, 40 animals, just try it. Go out and put 30 ounces in it and see how long it takes them to clean it up. See if they clean it up by the end of the day. And if they clean it up by the end of the day, then the next day you go out and give them maybe 32 ounces. Give them up to 1 ounce per head per day. If they don't clean it up, which they probably won't, then taper back. And that way you're going out there, you're giving them fresh mineral every day. I put it in a pan by their water. My animals get 2 things free choice every day. They get, well, 3 things technically. 4 things technically. If you count the pasture, I'm on a roll, aren't I? I'm like 2 things, 3 things, 4 things. Okay, so if we're not counting the pasture, we're now counting the water. They get free choice sodium bicarb, which is baking soda, and they get free choice mineral. And so they've got 2 pans out there by their water. They can get the bicarb or they can get the mineral. And I just put out what I think what they're gonna take in a day. And that way I don't have to worry about them making a mess out of it. I don't have to worry about it getting wet. I don't have to worry about them pooping in it. And I conserve that mineral and I'm not wasting it. If you have not yet tried mineral, I think it's something that you really, really need. And I don't care where you get it. I don't care if you get it from your cousin, if you get it from the big box store, if you get it from me, um, just get it. If you have your animals on pasture or if you don't have them on pasture, especially if you have them on pasture, though, get them a free choice mineral with vitamins, and you will notice a profound difference. You will notice a profound difference in their coat. You will notice a profound difference in the way that they handle their worm load, their thriftiness, the health of their babies, the health of them. It is a great, great thing to do. Now, if you have sheep and goats running together, you're going to need to give them a sheep mineral because you're not going to be able to give them something with copper in it. But if you have them separate, then you can get a goat mineral, you can get a sheep mineral, and you can go that way. So because you guys watch these and I appreciate it. Here is a code, July 13 live. So if you go to foundationfeed.com, feed.com, and you use that code for any of our free choice mineral. So the free choice sheep plus vitamin, free choice goat plus vitamin, and I even put the no phos mineral on there for males. It'll give you 20% off, but it's only good for like, I think it's only good for like 24 or 48 hours. And that way I figured every time I do these live feeds, I'm going to offer something like steeply discounted. And then that's kind of like my way of saying thanks for watching the videos. So, and again, I don't care if you buy from me. I would love for you to buy from me, but the reality is if you can go down to the corner and pick it up from your big box store, or from a feed rep that you appreciate and that you do your business with, and that's okay. I'm more concerned with you getting a free choice mineral with vitamins than where you get it from. Because if you have a good experience, if you have a good healthy flock, then we're going to keep talking. If you have a bad experience and you decide that you hate this and you don't want to do it anymore, then you're not going to keep watching my videos. So that's what it's all about. I want you to have a good experience. It helps everyone out. So the baking soda does lots of things. It helps the acidity in their rumen. It helps to keep it at the right level. It helps when they're eating high or low pH plants, especially the low pH plants. So when you look at pH, and we all heard of pH before, it's called power of hydrogen. And pH is, most people know pH from like their swimming pools, or they know about acids and bases. Maybe you talked about it in high school. So the lower a pH number, the more acidic it is. The higher a number, the more alkaline it is. And your goat and sheep stomachs need to stay at a very specific pH range. Now, in humans, we're at 7.35 to 7.45. I want to say in your goat's rumen, I want to say it's in 5.16, somewhere in that realm. Don't quote me on that. I would have to check it out. But essentially, what ends up happening is if your animal eats really low pH plants like alfalfa, clover can do this. It drops that pH a little bit too much in their stomach. Their stomach becomes too acidic and they get upset tummies, and they start doing a phenomenon called spilling their cud, where you'll go out there and your animal, it looks like it's got a green mouth, like a big green ring around their mouth, and they're barfing up all their cud. We call it spilling their cud. That's from too high of too low of pH, too high of input of high quality legumes. And so it also helps the bacteria in the gut to process food correctly when the gut is at proper pH. So if you offer sodium bicarb, baking soda, free choice, what you'll find, and it's like magic, and I don't know how they know, but they know, if they need it, they will eat it. If they don't need it, they will not touch it. It is very, very strange. And I don't know if any of you on here have given it before. I know we have a good friend that follows us in Ohio, and he was talking to me about it a few weeks ago. And he's like, "Man, I don't know how they know, but they know. And when they need it, they eat it. And when they don't, they don't." And so we offer free choice sodium bicarb. You can usually, I buy my sodium bicarb in 50-pound bags. I don't know. I don't sell it because no one's ever asked me for it before. If you guys find that you need bulk sodium bicarb, I guess let me know. I don't know what the grocery store prices are on it enough to tell you that if I would be cost effective to sell it or not. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, sodium bicarb helps out a lot. Helps out with vitamin B. Helps out with hoof growth. It helps out with rumen health. It's just a wonderful, cheap, safe, effective, non-toxic medication that you can give. Doesn't have any effect on, no withdrawal time, nothing. So feel free to offer that. Helen, hello. My goat herd gets fresh hay during the day and pasture when I bring them in at night. I give them grain, What and how do I get it out of the floor in buckets? I can't find anything. So we always we don't want to feed grain on the ground if we can help it. Um, because we just don't want the animals eating on the ground. Now we're fortunate because we have free choice. We're fortunate because we have free ranging chickens, and they just go behind and clean up behind the sheep and the goats. So, but you can get trays. You can make a tray, make a small tray out of wood. Um, you can make a tray out of a large piece of PVC pipe that's been split in half, but we want you to give them their feet in some kind of a tray to keep it up and off of the ground. And then once it gets on the ground, then it's a disaster trying to get it picked up. So the name of the game is keep it off the ground, keep it in a tray of some sort, and let them eat it there. And the other key is we just want to give them enough grain when we're talking about adults. We just want to give them enough grain that they're going to be able to clean it up in one setting. I don't ever give so much grain that it sits there. Ideally, just for maintenance, you want to be at about 1 pound per head per day of good quality grain, and that would be anything 12% and above. Now, obviously, with the little ones, if we're doing free choice creep, that's a different thing. But a good maintenance dose of grain is going to be 1/2 to 1 pound per head per day. And then go from there depending on what they need. If they're getting too fat, cut them back. If they're getting too lean, then you can bulk that up a little bit. I don't know if you need to, only you know if you need to feed hay. These animals are always hungry. Um, I've been to some farms. I have a good friend of ours that raises Valaeus black nose, and I went down there and I really gave her a hard time, and I told her how fat her sheep were. And she probably took better care of her animals than most people take care of their kids. And she was just overfeeding them. And I said, "Well, why are you feeding them so much?" And she said, "Well, they're hungry." Um, that's hard to argue, but they're always hungry. So for those of you that have low quality pasture, you may need to feed hay. For those of you that have good quality pasture, then it's okay to cut them off for a certain point in the day. Um, so there's lots and lots of things you can do. A pallet, you can take T-posts, drive 2 T-posts in the ground and slide a pallet over top of it. So you've got 2 T-posts holding a pallet up, and they make those hook buckets, those buckets that hook onto things. They will hook right onto a pallet, right in between the slats of a pallet, and they'll sit there just fine. So for the cost of a pallet and 2 T-posts, you can make yourself a little hanging thing to hang some little hook buckets from, and feed them that way as well. So just find a way, find what works for you, and go from there. Um, so yes, can the Ultra Goat Kid be added to your big box store recipe? Sure. If you're feeding an animal, so let's say you have a feed that you really, really love. Let's say that you have a feed that you just really, really love, that um, it has everything, but it's non-medicated and it's just a generic 12% feed, and you get a heck of a deal on it and you really like it. Then you can, um, in that case, you can buy free choice mineral from me or from someone else, medicated or unmedicated, and you can just add that to your feed. Just mix it up and add it to your feed. Now, you're going to want to make sure that you coat your feed with some kind of oil, either a wheat germ oil or a vegetable oil or soybean oil or something first, so that feed or molasses, so that feed is sticky and tacky, and that way when you add that mineral in there, it will evenly coat the feed. If that feed doesn't have some kind of oil or some kind of tackiness to it, when you put it in the mixer, when you add the mineral in there, the mineral is just going to fall out, and you're just going to have a bunch of feed with a bunch of mineral in the bottom of the mixer. So right, trying to catch up here with reading. Maybe at U.S. chef stores, a nationwide restaurant supply store would have bulk bicarb soda. Yeah, and most I buy my so I have an account through a large national distributor. I may be able to drop ship 50-pound bags of sodium bicarb. I'll have to check it out. Right now, I am paying $22.50 for a 50-pound bag of sodium bicarb, for food grade sodium bicarb. But here's the problem with me selling it. The problem with us selling anything is that we offer either $1 shipping or free shipping. So the reality is I have to bake the cost of the product in with the shipping. Otherwise, I got to send this stuff to you guys. And so if while 22.50 for a 50-pound bag sounds great, for most of you, it costs me around $9 to send you a 10-pound package. So I have to figure that in. So the reality with the bicarb is it's such a small window on there that if I buy it and I try to sell it in 10 pounds, by the time I bake in shipping, like it's going to be just as cheap for you to buy it at the grocery store. So I will look into sodium bicarb and see if I can get anything better for you. Helen, we have an 18 by 24 shed. We turned into a barn, so it had wood walls. Okay. Yeah, find something that works for you. My sheep go weeks without touching bicarb, but in a clover alfalfa flush, they'll hit it hard. Yeah, isn't that interesting? It's so cool to know. It's like they just know. They're like, yep, I'm in alfalfa, I'm in clover, or whatever, and they'll just destroy that sodium bicarb. And then other times, if they're in good grass, they won't touch it at all. Magpie, hi Magpie. I use old kitchen pots, large trays. If desperate, I'll use secondhand store stainless steel only. Yep, stainless steel is fantastic. So yeah, 1 pound per head per day is what I usually tell people. Start off with 1 pound per head per day for your animals, and that'll work for a wide variety of animals. And you can always up it. You can always give them more. You can always give them less. None of this is an exact science, and it's tough sometimes. You're gonna have the hog out of the group. You're gonna have the one animal that like goes bananas every time you put feed down, and they're gonna want to beat everybody else up and push everyone else out. And that's why we separate out a lot of our lambs and kids from the adults until they get up to weight and can fend for themselves. Because I'll tell you, if you keep babies in with the adults and you start pouring out grain, the babies aren't going to get any, or they're going to get hurt. Because these, if you've been raising any animals for any amount of time, you know that they do not mess around when it comes to feeding time. Now, another thing to consider is the time of day that you feed. I like to feed our grain in the evening when it starts to cool off. These animals eat so much better when it is cool outside, and you'll get a lot more quality feed. I think you just get better results from the feed by feeding them to them during a cooler time of the day. And the other thing that you'll find that we'll talk about some point soon that we don't have time to get into today is the time of day that you feed your animals correlates to the time of day that they will have their babies. And I know this sounds like voodoo stuff, but it is true, and we don't know why, but it is. So, Mr. Scientific here, I'm always trying to tell you guys things like, well, university studies say this, and I don't know why it works. I don't know why we get more patients in the hospital when there's a full moon. There's just things in this world that we don't understand. And I will tell you that the time of day that you feed your animals has a direct correlation on the time of day, generally speaking, that they're going to have their babies. So I'll make a video on that. I'll leave it up to that. So sheep have a bad tax. That is funny. That is true. 1 flake per head per day, unless on pasture, then I think it's one handful. Yeah. So 1 flake per head per day of hay is a good way to do it, unless you're feeding round bales. And if you have hogs that are going to sit out at the round bale all day long, you may have to develop some kind of setup to where they are going to where you're going to keep them away from that round bale for certain periods of time during the day. And then, as Brian alluded to, when we're running our goats on like nasty ground, like things like cleaning out brush and cleaning out tree lines and stuff like that, even in that case, I will still give them 1 fistful of hay per head per day. That's just as much as I can grab with my hand, hay, and I take it in there and I toss it to them. And that just helps keep their rumen cooking. Even though they're eating lots of leaves and weeds and things like that, it's a cheap, effective way to keep that rumen cooking when they're on less than desirable areas where they're eating. Helen, so maybe no grain at night, even when they cry. Well, they're probably, I'll tell you, sheep and goats get spoiled. They're just like kids. It's like, well, I give my kid ice cream every night, and now I'm not going to anymore. Well, you already know what's going to happen. So ease them out of it. There's nothing wrong with feeding them grain in the evenings. You can feed them grain in the morning, or you can feed them grain in the evening. The only time we ever feed animals grain multiple times during the day is if we have a show animal that we're really trying to pack the pounds on. But generally speaking, our commercial stock just gets fed grain one time per day, and for us, that's around 5 p.m. I know some people. My friend Wayne likes to feed his in the morning. Um, so it is what it is. I have most of my babies at sunrise or right before sunrise. Wayne has most of his babies in the evening. I feed at night. I have my babies in the morning. Wayne feeds in the morning. He has his babies at night. Yeah. So our ingredients for ram mineral the same, just without the phosphorus. That is correct. So our no phosphorus ram and buck mineral is specifically designed to give to males, and just for the sheer purpose that the calcium phosphorus ratio is correct, to where you don't have to worry about urinary calculi. April, yeah, don't forget to like. That's cool. I appreciate that. Anytime it's so. What's the deal with the likes? It's a lot more than everybody thinks. People think that you know. I don't know what people think. I don't get anything. I don't get like paid anything when you like my videos. Um, what it does is it ranks you better. So the more interaction you get from people, the more comments you get, the more likes, those things that you get, the longer people watch your videos. All goes into these magical algorithms where it determines if YouTube is going to show your videos to people, or like advise your video. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. But that's how they determine if they're going to show your video to other people or not. So anytime you guys like the video or you leave a comment, which I'm not, if you don't like the video, then don't do the thumbs up. Or if you don't have anything to say, that's okay. Some people just want to watch the darn video. That's it, just helps drive that algorithm is all. So that's why we push. I hate asking for people to give thumbs up. I hate asking for people to like and subscribe. It's just part of the beast of it's just part of the nature of this, um all in all. So when is it not good to give pregnant sheep copper sulfate, and does it treat hookworms? You can give copper sulfate to females all day long. You're fine. Uh, Obviously, I say that tongue in cheek. I had to be careful. I can't say things like all day long. Please don't give copper sulfate to your sheep all day long. Um, you can treat your animals the same way that you always do with the copper sulfate. It's not going to cause any issues when they're pregnant. The issues, it will treat gastrointestinal worms with the exception of tapeworms. Um, don't use valbazin for pregnant ewes and does. It does cause birth defects. It does cause some issues. So please try to avoid that. But as far as the copper sulfate, it's safe and effective to use on your pregnant ewes and does. We use it on our pregnant ewes and does. We don't have any issues. Do 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 do. Helen, believe it or not, they pulled them off. Melissa, hi Melissa. I feed my sheep in the evenings too. I just have had my first 3 lambs born this year. They were all morning lambings. Yeah, and it's not. We have these some bullheaded sheep and goats that they're just like, I'm gonna have my baby whenever I want to. And it was explained to me once, and I have a few people that are kind of my go-to folks. There's one individual specifically, Rick Adams. Rick knows more about raising sheep. He's probably forgotten more than I ever knew. And I called him last year because I just couldn't find any quality information on it. And I said, Rick, what's the deal with feeding and the time of day? And he said, well, it's not an exact science, but, and then he proceeded to explain it all to me. And for some reason, it's gone. I've just brain dumped it. So I promise, and we've talked about this before, about how we're going to switch to where I start interviewing people. Because I think that will be more beneficial, because essentially I'm going to run out of things. I would think I'm going to run out of things to talk about eventually. But if we can get other people on here to talk, so for our weekly, our weekly chit chats that we do here every Wednesday at 8 p.m., it would be really cool if I could get maybe another producer on here to talk with me, to where I could ask them questions and you can ask them questions. If we can get a couple big breeders, if we can get a veterinarian. Vets are going to be real hesitant to come on here. Just like on the Tack box, I have vets on the Tack box. The Tack Box is our group on Facebook. It's like an open forum, and I have vets on the Tack Box, and they will message me sometimes. Like if I get a question, like they'll send me a message and they'll say something, or if I say something that maybe they don't like, they'll send me a message. There's always lots of things that go on behind the scenes. We have a lot of people that show. We have a lot of people in the industry that watch but don't comment, or they'll contact me behind the scenes and they'll say, I disagree, or I agree, or you should do this, or you should do that, or whatever. And vets are real hesitant, and I don't blame them, because they have a license, and they have to be cautious of what they say. I am not a veterinarian, so if I tell you something, I'm just some crazy guy telling you to do something. I obviously try to give you the best information that I can, um, but I can appreciate why a vet wouldn't want to come on and just be spewing advice on how to do things, because ultimately, no matter how cautious we try to be, people don't follow directions appropriately. And yeah, it creates some issues. So I'm trying to think of what else. The last thing I wanted to talk about was covering bales. We have a video on covering bales. If you get bales, the best thing that you can do, especially with the round bales, is keep them butted end to end, keep them half covered with tarps, keep them on pallets. We have a video on that. If you do a search for that, you'll be able to find it. And that's how we store our round bales. You want enough airflow to let them breathe, but you want enough protection to protect them from the water and keep the water from soaking in there. If your bales are rolled, you need to keep them separated from one another at least for a couple days after baling, just to let them sweat and let them breathe, before you stack them up tight together. And again, we have a video of that. Um, yeah, Helen asks a great question, and Helen, you are the reason I have a successful YouTube channel, for that exact point that you just made right there. Helen says, I live in a rural area and I can't get a vet that does farm calls. Do vets not do that anymore? I have vets that bring, that come to me and ask me questions about, like, well, what do you do about this and what do you do about that? Because they know that I just sleep, eat, and breathe sheep and goat stuff all day long. And I do tons and tons of reading. I have some horse vet friends that are phenomenal when it comes to horses, and they're like, I don't know anything about sheep. I don't want to know anything about sheep. I have vet friends that deal with cats and dogs, and they're like, don't know, don't care. And so it's a matter of, okay, who can you find in your area that does things, and who's willing to come out. Now we have veterinarians that come out, to our farm that live 2 miles up the road from me, and you can do phone consults with veterinarians. So don't feel like you can't. There are phone consults, that you can do with a veterinarian. They're going to charge you, but that's okay. If you run into an issue where it's like, you just have a question that you can't get answered, or it's going to require you to have a prescription, you can call stock vets. I've sent people to stock vets. This is the vet that I use. I use stock vets, and they're in Rensselaer, Indiana. And there are two very good veterinarians there, Dr. Rumsey and Dr. Emmett, and they do fantastic work, and they will take phone consults. And if they have to get you a prescription medication, they can always call in a script to places. They can call in a script to Valley Vet. They can call in a script, to any online store, and you can still get the medications that you need, and you can still get good, solid sheep and goat advice from a good, solid veterinarian, and not have any issues. So don't be afraid to call these people. Now, when you call them, at least tell them that I sent you. And again, just to reiterate, I am not sponsored by anyone ever. So I am just giving you these guys a number because they're who I use. And if they're good enough for me, then they're good enough for you. How about that? That's what we're going to say. So 866-3636. So there's their number. Write it down. You find yourself in a pinch. You got an issue with the sheep or goat. These guys are nationally known goat and sheep guys, small ruminants, they know what they're doing. They do artificial insemination. They do everything. Dr. Rumsey is fantastic. Dr. Emmett is a young vet that's getting trained with Dr. Rumsey. They're all good. So just call them and say, hey, um, you know, just call them and say, hey, I got a question I don't have an answer to, or I need a med. And I was watching Tim from Linessa Farms, and he said to call you, and they'll take good care of you. So that is always an option. Now, if it's something simple that I can answer the question for you, I'll answer it for you. But there's going to be times, and I get questions from people, and they're like, "Hey, I got this, and I don't know what to do," and I'll just tell them, if I don't know, I don't know. I'll say, "Hey, I don't know." And I'll try to find out. And sometimes you got to call the vet. So, but I appreciate it. I know, there's people that I have friends that are 3 hours away from the closest veterinarian. And when you need a veterinarian, you need a veterinarian. I had a goat that I had to get a C-section on this year. Like, I'm not doing a C-section. Uh, Not happening. So I had to take him up to the vet. We have times where I call the vet. It's far and few between, but it happens. I have my limitations, and that's part of this is learning your limitations and just doing the best you can do to take care of the animal and to do what you think is right. So I feel like we had a great video. I feel like this was a really good video. I really enjoy doing the 1 hour, or in this case, 1 hour and 15 minutes with you guys every week. I think it's a small amount of time for us to come together. And the beauty of it is you can always reflect on this. You can always go back and watch this again if you need to. So more videos coming up. We got a fun video coming up really soon this weekend. We're going to talk about some things that we used to do that we don't do anymore. We're going to talk about some items that we used to purchase that we don't purchase anymore. We're going to talk about some items that are complete garbage that you shouldn't purchase, and things like that. So if you have questions, then contact us. Send us an email, give us a call, go to the Tack box and ask on there, and we don't mind, and we'll do our best to answer. So we really appreciate all of you. You all make a big difference in our lives and in our ability to do this. And it's great to be able to help people. So and just like we see here, we've got somebody from India. We have people from all over the world. So it's awesome. So we really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing all of you again soon. So I'm Tim from Linessa Farms, Specialty in Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today, and I look forward to seeing all of you again next time. Have a great night.